push Memphis.
Okay. All right.
Hmm.
Okay. And we're going to come up in 4. No, let me come up in 20. 10. Hmm. Oh, wow. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you in this second hour. We have got a lot to talk about. So much is happening in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Let's talk about ICE. Let's talk about the pivot that the administration is making on Minnesota. And I think it's because of your activism, your activism. I mean, some of you have been charging the hotel where you have tracked ICE to be staying. And now Greg Bavino is supposed to be leaving as of today, as of the moment of this recording. They're getting him out of there. But what's next? Well, the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, has asked for the voting records of all states and Washington, D.C. Your state, Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, has already turned that information over to the federal government. There are a lot of questions about that because that's your social security number. That's some of the most personal data you have. Texas has already turned that over. I think at least 8 or 9 other states have done that as well, if not more. So what about that? And Minnesota is very interesting because Minnesota is the state with the highest voter turnout. Did you know that, everybody? You have the highest voter turnout. Jane Ruby, a League of Women Voters of Chicago, Dr. Joseph Kyle's Rainbow Push, uh, Memphis, they have the highest voter turnout in the nation. You do. And furthermore, you are known to be a model, the paradigm of election integrity. So you have the highest voter turnout, and you have the most integrous system. So when the Attorney General reached out to the Secretary of State and said, look, we can clear up all of this. We can end this ICE siege on Minneapolis. If you turn over your voter data, then, maybe we can just let this go. Now, what does all of that mean? Let's talk about this, everybody, because, there are the Civil Rights Act of 1960, the Help America Vote, the Motor Voter Act, that gives the feds oversight of our national elections. But it's a fragmented system. Some counties control the elections, some states control the elections. It is not a uniform system at all. But what we do know is that you have a right to have your personal information, your information data preserved. And this is thwarting. If this goes through, you will have a national database of all of your information, and you will see voter purges like we've never seen before. So I want us to talk about this because different states are going to turn over the data. They already have in Texas. They've already done it. So let's talk about this, everybody. I mean, because it seems as if at least up until this moment that Minnesota was being held hostage. But something in this story has changed because now Tom Homan, who is the border czar, is in Minneapolis. They have removed Commander Bavino because killing Renee Good, that was awful. But something just popped loose with the killing of Alex Pretty. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because he's a nurse, worked for the VA, or maybe it's because we saw his killing even more clearly than we saw the killing of Renee Good. What we did see was a man who was chivalrous, if I may say so myself. He saw a woman get knocked down and he went to her rescue. He already had a broken rib because he was in a March last week, and he was attacked by ICE.
Mm.
So he went back in pain. And when he saw this woman knocked to the ground, he said, "Wait a minute, no." And he was dead within a couple of minutes. And they would not even, they checked his body for bullet holes before they checked his pulse.
My, my.
Yeah, my father would say that, Dr. Joseph Kyles, my. There's some things that's all you can do. You have to sound like your grandmama, your great grandmama. Like that's what they would say. My. That's all you can say. So we need to talk about that, everybody. And I want you all to like and share this show, like and share the show. We're going to share some information with you. We're going to talk about ICE and where that is going. Indeed, Attorney Tanya Woods, the West Side Justice Center here in Chicago. Indeed, the work that you're doing is of tremendous consequence nationally. You have been saying, look, this is about more than Latino people. This is about something deeper. And many of us are beginning to see it. Now we see white people have black problems. And it does not give me any joy to say that, y'all. It really doesn't. This is very, very painful to watch. But I hope it's a teachable moment for us. I really, really do. Why does that resonate with you, Attorney Woods?
Well, because this is an issue that we've been talking about for, decades, especially in this country, about the similarities between communities that have historically been disadvantaged, who are furthest from opportunity, and who suffer from systemic racism, discrimination, and oppression. This is not a new topic, but what we see generation after generation are new iterations of the oppression, new iterations of systemic racism and discrimination, and quite honestly, new ways of fighting back. So I think where so many advocates and activists are weary is because we continue to seem to be fighting the same fight. With seemingly no end in sight, but by the same token, we have new people that are joining the fight, new comrades, new co-collaborators, and co-conspirators. But there is a kind of tiring in this fight against racism and discrimination that I think people are tired of. I think that the general citizenry is often disillusioned by how they raise their voices and how they use their vote to affect change. Seemingly, when you think you've gotten ahead, we see the same kinds of horrific racism rest upon people who have been fighting so long. And so I think there's both, this tension between, this is the same fight that we've been fighting. And while we have certainly made some gains in this country, why are we still fighting this same fight? And
Mhm.
why are we seeing new ways to wreak havoc in communities, to create chaos, to create division and derision? I think that's the part where we become weary. But what I find encouraging is that there are new soldiers in the fight, meaning that there are young people that are emerging leaders that are taking up the mantle of civic engagement and being a part of, using the electoral process to fight against these new forms of oppression. But the violence, that's the part that I think is particularly disturbing. If you
Mhm.
were telling a story about the 1960s, and if we were telling a story about the 50s when people were being lynched, when folks were being dragged behind trucks, pickup trucks, by ropes that had been tied to their ankles, it's the kind of horrific atrocities that we are seeing in the 21st century that I think is making people really shudder and say, like, is this actually happening in America? This is not happening in Eastern Europe or in, some far-flung place on the globe, but this is actually happening in what's supposed to be the strongest, mightiest, most forward thinking, technologically advanced country on the planet. But we are seeing people being shot in their face. We are
Mhm.
seeing people walk away and saying things, being overheard on body cams and audio tapes, that this is a game that's kind of like Halo, which is a video game, or other sorts of crazy, what seems like crazy comments being made by what are supposed to be law enforcement. So I think that's the kind of challenge that we are facing. We're trying to make sense out of something that actually doesn't make any sense at all. And
Well,
then to
you,
see our law enforcement not going checked by any level of government, not um, thank God we have some jurists that are sitting on benches across the
Mhm.
nation that are making the right decisions. And by right, I mean morally right, ethically right, and within the four corners of the law. But to be able to think that, if but for those brave justices, some of this behavior is being not only condoned but endorsed by our federal government and by our commander in chief, and that is definitely frightening to me.
Well, we have to tip our hat to the people of Minneapolis and the people in Minnesota because they have stepped up like the people in Chicago did. They have stepped up and they have pushed so hard that they've actually shifted the conversation. Many people, according to reports, in the White House knew immediately that this was a problem because they jumped out ahead of the story. And when people saw the video, they said, oh, wait a minute. But apparently, the story, the narrative that, according to reports, that Stephen Miller, who's really probably the most influential advisor that the president has in the White House, someone who's tremendously powerful, uh, he had put the story out there. And it has been it has been chaos. I'm going to go around the panel because I want to hear what everybody's got to say. Let me start with you, Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds. You're a man of tremendous influence in your state government, and your governor turned over your voter roll information. Wow. I was just turned it over. Now he's being a little critical of ICE, but I think that's also the politics, right? Because now everybody is so appalled, and the more angles you see on this video, because a lot of the killing of Renee Good was obscured. You saw her matter. I'm sorry, blowing out of the side of her car. Yep, it's awful, but that's what we saw. And some of us were. I sadly saw her on the steering wheel when before they were able to pixelate the picture. When the physician was asking to be able to see her, and the ICE agent said, "I don't care." Then he said, "May I just check her pulse?" No. And when the medics came, they didn't even have a gurney for her. They carried her down the street like she was a sack of potatoes. So, yeah, it's enough to make you go, Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds.
Well,
What do
well,
you?
Santita, first of all, I want to echo everything that Attorney Woods articulated. And being a Texan, I'm definitely ashamed of Governor Abbott and his failed leadership, as well as the other MAGA extremists that have bent and bowed at the knees to President Trump and the Justice Department's request. They did not have to turn over the voter files, but they have done everything, just like when it came to the racial gerrymandering, just uh, acquiescing and given whatever their king wants, they give it to them. And regardless of what it's going to do potentially to the citizens of the state, because it's all about them holding on to power. And Governor Abbott is complicit in this whole thing, just like President Trump is complicit with these ICE shootings, with his inflammatory rhetoric, with not having accountability for the previous deaths. Why should we be surprised at the most recent death? Because they didn't do anything, or they made excuses and cover-ups. Finally, people of good conscience are saying, "Wait a minute! I just saw the video. I what you said was a flat out lie." So thankfully, you have some people of good conscience, in addition to all the people in Minnesota, people that are on the Republican side are saying, "Hey, wait a minute. I'm with you on the deportations and ICE, but come on now, this is too much." That's when finally you're seeing some form of accountability. Not enough, because Christine Nome, she needs to be impeached. ICE, I know this is going to be inflammatory. I believe in law and order and protecting the borders, but until ICE is put some parameters and checks and balances, we need to abolish it, pause the funding for it. There needs to be a recalibration of ICE, because ICE is run amok right now. They're not trained. They're not efficient in the way that they're carrying out these duties, and they seem like lawful vigilantes. And until we get rid of qualified immunity, it seems like they're untouchable. So I have a lot of problems with the way that ICE is conducted, and it all comes from the top, President Trump. And then lastly, you go to Attorney General Bundy when she says, well, hey, just turn over the voter rolls and we'll get out of your hair. Like, come on, are you serious? That should tell people should be outraged by the mere fact that you're trying to use the voter rolls as a bargaining chip. So you really aren't there for law and order. You're really there to wreak havoc and to get the voter rolls. So hey, you can make your problems go away if you just turn over the voter rolls. I applaud Governor Walz and Minnesotans, just like I did Chicagoans and Governor Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson, because they stood up. They stood up to the bully of Trump and his authoritarian regime and his MAGA extremists, and they fought back. This is a turning point for American citizens to say, we're going to make good trouble. And we have to be part of the resistance to push back, because that's the only way that we stop it, Santita. Otherwise, we're going to see more and more lawlessness, more and more trampling upon the Constitution of American citizens. And finally, these let's say if a person is an illegal immigrant, do we give them the death penalty? Does that mean we just kill them on sight? No, they should be able to have due process and be deported, not killed on sight. So, but to make matters worse, we're talking about American citizens that were exercising their constitutional rights. We have a right to free speech. We have a right to protest. And so, what if he had a gun? If it's the law to open carry? None of them said anything about those January 6th insurrectionists. They were patriots. But you get someone who you don't agree with. You want to build this narrative. Oh, he was killed because he had a gun. He wasn't brandishing his gun. There was no fear of the officer's safety. So we have to call out the nonsense and the BS, and we have to stand on principle. And I'm so proud of people of good conscience on both sides of the aisle. Not all Republicans yet, because you said it. And I want to make sure people remember the name Stephen Miller. This guy is a cancer to this country. He's a racist. He is doing everything, and he has the president's ear. He's running amok, and there's no accountability on him, right? He's unelected, but he has so much power, and he's influencing policies that are promulgated from Project 2025. So thank you for putting us together. It's time for people to keep standing up. We're not out of the water yet, but this is a turning point. I do believe that there is going to be some measure of accountability, even though President Trump has said that Christine Noem is doing a fine job, which I don't think she is. She needs to be impeached, and there needs to be accountability from him as well as everyone that has a hand in this. Blood is on all of their hands.
Well, Congresswoman Robin Kelly of Illinois, my Congresswoman, by the way, has drafted articles of impeachment against her. And she's getting more and more support. So we will see how this is going to go. Jane Ruby, League of Women Voters of Chicago, we are seeing growing memorials in Chicago for Alex Pretty. There's something about his killing that has just shocked the conscience. I don't know if any people saw. They took his body to the VA hospital where he worked, and they put an American flag over his body and walked him through the hallway so that he could be saluted by his colleagues. Just painful to see. And, just he was brandishing his phone because everyone has been told to record this. And with his other hand, he was trying to stand in between a woman and men who were about to pounce upon her. I mean, wow, Jane. So, and now we are in the season. What we're about to have, the primary season has started. So now many people are wondering if cross-check will be employed, if we will see voter purges. I cannot wait to hear Darrell Jones, he and Barbara Arnwine are really the foremost experts on this, and I cannot wait to hear what they've got to say. But Jane, I mean, what do you say about all of this? Because it's like we're being hit by a lot of things at one time.
Yeah, I think that it's overwhelming in so many different capacities, and even as you're speaking, like all of us on the video, we're all getting teary-eyed and emotional because it's something even beyond all of our sort of professional experience and everything. It's very hard to have the words for what's going on. I was reading something today about in the 60s, Mr. Rogers, with everything that happened with the Kennedys being assassinated, MLK being assassinated, Mr. Rogers did this whole program about what do you do, how do you talk about this with kids? And his whole thing was, the kids need to go to their helpers, the adults in their life who are, the people that, are kind of the buffer between the bad times and what kids, are perceiving. And I saw something today, someone wrote, Mr. Rogers, what do you do when the helpers are getting killed? And that completely just I was in a bit rough emotion seeing that, because I think that to me, I was it's so hard to find the words to describe what we're all feeling. And I feel like that to me just, hit a chord. It's the helpers, the Alex Preddy, Renee Good, there's so many others who have, put their bodies on the line, who have been outspoken, which is also, you're not allowed to speak out. You get blacklisted, you get harassed at your job, social media bans, all of these things, just by speaking out. It's everything from speaking out to putting your body on the line to, joining organizations in the space, advocating, calling your reps, anything you do, there feels like there's so much risk. And, everyone who is part of the resistance, whatever we're calling this, is, we're all in danger. And what I think that's why what has happened with Alex Preddy has resonated so much with people, is that here's someone who, was a nurse, was helping, was, doing all of the right things that we're all told to do to be good people in the world. And even that is sort of under threat, under attack. I think Chicago has been hit really hard the past few months with ICE stuff. I was just getting notifications today on my phone that ICE is back in my neighborhood, even in sub-zero temperatures, they're back. We have a lot of concerns going into the March primary of what that's going to look like. We're about to be launching sort of an election protection peacekeeping program to ensure that people feel safe in Chicago going out to the polls. We're doing all the right things, and stuff is still happening, and it's really messed up. And it's really coming down to community, who's safe these days, because there's so much unsafe things going on, and it's wild.
It'll leave you speechless. I mean, and Dr. Joseph Kiles, help us to understand. You wrote a tremendous piece. And of course, you are in Memphis, Tennessee, and your uncle and your Aunt Gwen, Uncle Reverend Billy Kiles, your Aunt Gwen Kiles, Mrs. Kiles made the last meal that Dr. King was going to eat. Everybody was on their way to their home, on South Parkway East.
That's
where
right.
I spent so much time growing up. My mother didn't let us, Tanya and Jane, I think as mothers, you get it. Not that the other parents do not.
We understand.
But my mother wouldn't let us spend the night anywhere. But when we went to Memphis, we didn't stay in the hotels. We stayed with the Kiles. My mother had so much love for Mrs. Kiles in particular. She loved your Uncle Billy. But the mothers set the temperature in the house. And I just have to thank you and the Kiles family for being part of our lives. But you have continued to go on, and you have been really at the vanguard of Rainbow Push in Memphis. And you felt that it was important for us to look at Dr. King's unfinished business. I mean, it's economic, it's voting rights, it's everything. And you're in a state where I'm wondering if they would be turning over their voter rolls. I would think that they would be inclined
I think so.
What do you make of this moment?
Well, first, Santita, let me say how happy I am to be with this panel of great thinkers and leaders and doers. And to you, you are one of the most courageous global voices that we have out there. And we certainly appreciate how you continue to charge forward with courage. And so I'm so thankful to call you my dear sister. Democracy fails when citizens feel like the system is rigged against them. And it's interesting, I sent a note out today when I saw a response from a group of well-meaning gun owners who made sure that the national voice was heard, that they were going to continue to carry their guns to these protests. And then it's ironically, we see that there has been sort of a backstep. I think that it is interesting. I sent it to my oldest daughter, Taylor, and I asked her, what did she see in that statement? And she said that she saw a threat against a perceived threat. Now, this is a 30-year-old. She's looking at something different. And that's the way that particular group sees it. But I saw something different. I saw a Caucasian male being murdered in the streets. And what I was reminded of, Fannie Lou Hamer was arrested, jailed, and they brought two burly men into the jail cell, and they told them if they didn't beat her to death, that they would be killed. And these grown men, crying with tears in their eyes, beat Fannie Lou Hamer until they broke several bones in her body, in her ribs, her face. And so they were covered with sweat. No one saw that. As we said, we heard Jane talk about it. We heard Attorney Woods, Representative Reynolds. The conversation is now what our lying eyes now see. We cannot turn away from what our lying eyes now see. And I'm blessed to be able to contribute from time to time with the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis. And I wrote an op-ed dealing with that. We currently have a GNP of 30 trillion. We've got 43 million Americans living at or below the poverty level. What that means in Memphis, as I had a conversation with Dr. Vincent Hunter the other day, and he brought it to my attention. He said a family of four living on $29,000. That is extreme poverty. And so our conversation now, when we're dealing with this major threat in terms of voter suppression and looking at ways where we are not all equal, I think we really have to stop and take a look at how we have equal protection under the law for all of us. And that is what Reverend Jackson has dedicated his life to. That is what Uncle Billy, Reverend Kyles often talked about, punching holes in the darkness. And if we don't take this time now to stand up, birthright citizenship will be the next thing that they challenge. I heard Attorney Woods speak of it. She didn't say it, but that's what they're going to come to. When an individual who is not a judge can sign a warrant and go into a home and extract someone, we are on the verge of civil war, because there are some cities and some communities where you cannot do that. I don't care who you are. You will not be able to kick down doors and extract people without being met with resistance. And I think that that's what I hear you saying in terms of that conversation of why is this so different from Alex, right? Let's think about Alex for just a second. An individual who was a war veteran, a service member, an ICU nurse, someone who continually served in the capacity of sharing and giving, and it was clear that he was not there to hurt anyone. And so I think that we have to be very careful how we move forward. We're thankful that the national presence is deciding to come out of Minneapolis, but when you opened up the show, you gave us all an example of information of why their presence has been so strong there. And lastly, I'll say this: relationships matter. Here in the city of Memphis, I'm thankful that we all have a relationship, but Chief CJ Davis, our chief police, and other members of law enforcement got together with the members of that task force, and they did not put them in neighborhoods. They didn't put them in, they put them in large tourist areas where they could be used usefully. I believe we need law enforcement in practical and proper areas, but when you have the right type of leadership, I think CJ Davis and her group and our local sheriff and our local enforcement work very hard to keep this type of action from occurring. And we've got to count on those type of relationships in these different cities.
Because Joseph, Jane, Ron, Tanya, Daryl, there are people who are standing guard in their communities in Minneapolis right now with guns.
That's right.
And reporters have walked up to these people because you can carry, it's open carry there. They've asked, what are you doing? And each person has said, I'm guarding my community. And I think that there's something that has popped loose here, as the old folks would say. Something changed, and I think we need to beware. And now with the Attorney General, wanted to cue this all up for you, Attorney Darrell Jones. Of course, you and Barbara Arnwine are on WOL in Washington, D.C., but you can hear it all over the country, all over the world, every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Is this blackmail? I mean, for A.G. Bondi, for her to say, you know what, we can settle this ICE matter right now if you turn over your voter rolls. Really? Is that how you interpreted her request, or was it a demand?
No. She certainly is trying to do a quid pro quo. Okay, she's trying to get these voter rolls so that they can go in and start getting everyone's information, and they can start causing all kinds of havoc within the voting system and going after individual voters. That's what they're after. But
wait. No, no. Let me stop you right here because I want you to be very, very specific about that. Creating havoc. How could they go after certain voters with this information?
Once they have the voting information, the voter data, knowing who votes, where they vote, all the other indicators as to how they probably vote, meaning whether or not they're progressive or conservative voters, they can then dice out and go after those progressive voters. If those would be the voters that they're after. And going after those voters, they could just go after voters with Hispanic surnames and then start going after them individually to try to challenge their ability to vote. For instance, in the state of Georgia now, one of the things that they have is a system where an individual, one person, can go in and challenge voters. And when they just go in to challenge voters, they can challenge any number of voters. They could challenge 10,000 voters by the touch of an email by hitting that button. And all of a sudden, 10,000 Hispanic surname voters are challenged. This is the type of information that comes from this voter data. This is what they're after. They talk about cross-check. What they want to do and what that means is that they want to get all the data, get the information about the voter, and then they want to cross-check it with information to see if the voter is valid, if they should be voting. Well, that sounds great, right? Who would be against that? The problem is what their history is that what they'll do is that they'll look for give me a good example, a Leroy Jones. And if they see another Leroy Jones, they'll cancel one of them out, saying that person is double registered. And they don't care that there could be multiple Leroy Jones. There could be different people. It could be father and son. None of that matters. Their ultimate goal is to reduce the number of voters that they think will be against them. That's what they do with the cross-check. That's what it's about. That's why they want the voter data. They want that voter data more than anything because that enables them to strengthen their position to try to stay in power by limiting the number of voters that may be voting against them. That's the ultimate goal of the regime, is always to stay in power. Do what you have to do to try to weaken your enemy to strengthen yourself. And so if they can weaken the number of voters, dilute the number of voters that would be possibly against them, they're strengthening themselves so that they have a greater probability of winning in those elections. That's what the collection of this voter data is all about. That's why when Attorney General Pam Bondi says, give me the voter data and I'll get out, that's the reason why. Because it's all about control. And that's what this is. It's control that they're after. let me tell you, Santita, and it didn't take me much to get worked up today because Ron was with me early today, and he knows I was worked up early today on our show. Let's understand this, and I just want people to really get an appreciation for what's happening, because when we're talking about Renee Good and when we're talking about Alex Preddy, we're talking about two Americans, two are tax-paying Americans, two Americans who paid the salaries for those folks that killed them. They paid into that. They paid into that. And let's just take this can up. Let's open it up all the way, Santita, because let's understand what ICE is about. Okay, ICE now in the last year has gone from 10,000 ICE agents to over 22,000 ICE agents that are out there on the streets. What are they doing? They're trying to intimidate people that are there. They've gone from a budget of some, what was it, $10,000 or excuse me, $10 billion where they were, to now they're at $85 billion. There's more ICE agents. There are more money put into ICE agents, more money put into ICE agents right now than all the federal law enforcement associations combined. All of them. That's ICE. That's what we're dealing with. So let's understand that, that when we talk about this being an army, it really is an army that's out there to try to intimidate and influence Americans that are there. And so what you're seeing, I think, right now in Minnesota and Minneapolis, and I've always taken my hats off to the folks that are there, that are pushing back, because what you're seeing are the people, the citizens, coming forward and saying, no, this isn't right. It's not going to happen, and I'm going to stand in the breach. That's my neighbor. That's my brother. That's my sister. There's a system that should be in place, and they should have afforded justice. If they did wrong, let the system deal with it the way that the judicial system, should deal with it. So, that's what we're really seeing happen right now, Santita, and it's an erosion of the public trust that is in our law enforcement. That is, and if the court system continues the way it's going, it'll be the court system too. And the Congress, the majority in Congress have shown that there's a lot of public distrust that's coming from Congress as well. That's why you heard Representative Reynolds, governor, talking about stepping back now, reversing his position, right, standing back, because the public temperature with regards to what's happening there is against him. It's against the Trump administration. So you're going to see them now trying to reverse field, because it's not about their principal position. It's about politics and getting elected. And what do they have to do to maintain their control and to maintain their seat and to maintain their political power, Santita? That's what we're saying.
I think we have to, yes. And Dr. Kyle, please add this in too.
Okay.
So I think we have to begin to really, I say this a lot, Attorney Woods and Jane Ruby, looking beyond Trump, because presidents really are spokespersons for the oligarchs. You have a techno-fascist, if you will. I mean, that's Elon Musk, that's Peter Thiel, that's Alex Karp, who you don't know. It's all these South Africans who've come over here. Mm-hmm. That's who are products of apartheid South Africa, and they've come here. And Elon Musk has set up 2 cities, with more to come, in Texas that are corporate cities. They will have boards, not councils. I mean, these are people who don't believe in the vote. And we're so busy, looking at President Trump's personality. He's got a tremendous amount of charisma. You don't have to like him. I'm talking about the fact some people have the power to draw you in, and he does have that power. And I will say, my father has said his profound disappointment in him, because he has known him a long time. He said, he said, what hurts me is that he is not using this gift of the spirit, which is what charisma is, to lift people. He's hurting people. Mm-hmm. You know what happens when people use that gift to lift people, which is what you were writing about, Dr. Kyles. So right. I'm sorry, just talk to me, because there's so much going on, and I think we're so focused on the president, Tanya, mm-hmm. that we're missing the people who who missing the people who are the people who are really running things, if you will.
I don't
Santita,
disagree. Go ahead,
oh, go ahead.
Dr. Kyle.
Mhm.
Just quickly, I had a conversation today with one of our phenomenal educators. Ms. Moffitt is a vice principal of one of our local high schools here. And we were talking about what Attorney Jones just mentioned. What we have now is a national poll tax, this grab for voter rolls. And we remember, in terms of what was important, you had this jar of candy. And when an individual would come in to vote, they had to count the number and the pieces of candy in order to vote. That's what we're seeing in terms of Mr. Miller and his approach to the national. It is a desensitizing of everything that matters and that is real, so that you have a hard time sifting through what is the truth and what they have conceived and connived and come to put forth as their agenda. And I think that that is very dangerous for us. We should be having conversations at our high schools that require automatic registration, not opting out, making sure that every individual that comes across with a diploma, as Reverend Jackson has said through his many years of traveling, a diploma in one hand, a voter registration card in the other. That's what I wanted to say, Attorney Woods.
Attorney Woods?
I was going to make a comment to what we think of as the technocrats and the folks kind of behind the scenes pulling the puppet strings, if you will. And I think that is the part that's probably most convoluted for most voters and for just everyday citizens. It's like, what is this all about? And who are the people that are actually controlling some of the activities? And we see them all kind of come together in the head of this persona of the commander-in-chief in the character of Donald Trump, when indeed it's a far more complex issue than that. We're really talking about systems change, not just electing or not electing a single individual. I say all the time, there's always an election happening in Chicago. Either you're voting for a judge, you're voting for your mayor, you're voting for an alderman, you're voting for somebody, it seems like, at all times in Chicago. And while that sounds a little cheeky, it is my goal to make every voting citizen recognize that we must be hyper vigilant at all times, paying attention to the electoral scene. And by that, I mean, for those of us who are kind of steeped in this work, we have to make it plain and simple for the everyday American. We have to make it plain and simple for the people who live in our households, who we actually have control or influence. I won't say control over, but who can influence and who are listening to us. We have to make it personal and really connect the issues that we are facing as everyday people with the people who are supposed to represent us, either as judges. Your friends that you went to law school are now circuit court judges. Your friends who were circuit court judges are now being tapped on the shoulder to be magistrate judges. The people that you went to law school are probably sitting on a federal bench somewhere, and they are effectuating policy change by the very decisions that they are passing down in the court cases that we are seeing being brought today, right? So it's all very personal, and we have to make it personal so that folks don't get caught up in the rhetoric that, it's about Donald Trump or Elon Musk, because that might pass you by, right? You may not actually have time to take in all of the complexities that there are, but you do know that you have a vote to vote for a congressperson that's coming up in March in a matter of moments. You do have a responsibility to actually educate yourself about where they stand on the issues. You do actually have a responsibility to attend a candidate forum at a place near you, a church or a community center. There are two happening in Chicago on February 12th and 19th. We have two very important congressional races, a total of 4 extremely important congressional races, but 2 and 7, those districts impact the Black communities very, very personally. And so, while we can unpack some of these more complex themes, I think it's also our duty and our responsibility to make it plain and to make it simple, so people not only know that their vote matters, but their vote is critical, especially now more than ever before. You may never, ever see the president of the United States. I guarantee you're going to have a traffic ticket that you have to show up for court for somebody, right? That's a person you actually will stand in front of. You will go to a debate or to a candidate forum or an event where you will run into your local congressperson, and you will have an ability to share with that person the issues that are important to you. And so that's really where I'm coming from when it comes to electoral politics becoming personal.
Well, absolutely. Jane, we are coming, we are in 2026. It's like we've been talking about it since 2024. But here we are. How do we, I mean, and I want everyone to weigh in on this. What are we going to do? I mean, as we're seeing a grab for our voter data, I mean, this already happened with Doge. With two, remember, there were two members of the Musk team at Social Security who took the data and gave it to an advocacy group that have specialized in overturning elections. I mean, this has already happened, and only heaven knows it's been happening. So, number one, we need to make sure that we're still registered to vote. Daryl, that's a drum that you all beat all the time. But I mean, Jane, what do you see? Because this is all happening, and I mean, to your point, Tanya, this is happening in voting season. I mean, this is very consequential, and I don't want people to miss that point. Thank you for that. That while all of this is happening, it's voting time, Jane. And we need to have some real, oh gosh, I wish the League of Women Voters ran these debates again. Oh, because now now they're run by television networks and they're not as solid. So, I mean, so what are we going to do? Because as to Attorney Wood's point, we really do need to have fora for everybody who's running. Because, we've got these judges, we don't know them, but they have tremendous power over our lives.
So I'm going to just go ahead and jump in, Santita, and just lift up these couple of dates, because it is important to say that there are forums that are needed and more. We have a hotly contested races with a lot of candidates. On February 12th, there's a congressional District 7 forum happening on the west side on February 19th, one on the south side on February 21 for the candidates that are running for Senate in the state of Illinois, which we know that is a race that everybody across the country is looking at, right? So I think, Jane is probably collaborating with other organizations that are holding forums, but we need to make those forums, not just hold them, but make them accessible in the community where people can actually feel like they are a part of that conversation. Because you're right, Santita, all too often we're just looking at the televised ones, and nobody asked us what questions we wanted to ask the candidates, right? And then they just become kind of like news stories. But there are forums happening in communities, but it takes opportunities like the one that you're giving us tonight to be able to share that information with the public at large, but also to make sure that people know about what's happening in their neighborhoods. I just wanted to kind of shout that out. And then one organization that's doing that work, boots on the ground, is Chicago Black Voter Project, for one. That is partnering with and collaborating with other grassroots and civic organizations like our National Panhellenic Council, Black Women Lawyers Association, our Cook County Bar Association, to put on these forums so that people can walk down the street, take a bus, not two trains and a bus, to go hear from these candidates, but going armed with questions that are going to ask the hard questions of these candidates and ask them where they stand on these very important issues.
In Memphis, we are working on two of the, we've got a candidate forum for our Shelby County mayor's race, which is a very important race. We're looking at over $6 to $8 billion that are going to be spent in the next 4 years in Memphis and Shelby County, and it is a major race. And then we have a Shelby County sheriff's race. We've had over 10 deaths in the jail, and we really need to address that in terms of administration and how we make sure that individuals, 201 Poplar is a holding facility. It is not a prison, and we need to make sure we get the right person in that sheriff's office. And also we have a congressional race that's going on that will be extremely important in terms of transportation dollars and getting our MATA back on track, where we can get workers to and from their positions and their jobs, and also workforce development, where we can get these resources in the community so we can spend more time on prevention as opposed to punitive challenges.
Jane, in your estimation, what are the things that we need to be, what are the questions that we need to be asking? Because Chicago, ICE, as you said, they're not leaving. They're coming back. They have 70,000 plus people in detention. Where are they? You've got more than 3,000 children who are missing. Missing. Are we talking about child trafficking? I want to know where these babies are. We saw a 5-year-old child separated from his father. Oh, well, of course they said, well, no. What he's doing, of course, when they arrested his father, they had to, no. You don't take some child from their parent. You don't do that. What are you doing? What is this? I mean, so to me, it's, it's granular, but it's the macro and the micro. I mean, what do you think we should be doing at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. There's so much that's happening in the spectacle that, it's the big personalities, the big actions. It's amazing that Minneapolis and Minnesota have, been at the forefront of, what resistance looks like, in a media sense. But ICE is in so many other pockets of the country and is not getting the media coverage. People are getting kidnapped in Maine and New Jersey and New York and all over the country, and Illinois still. This is a problem, and those are often the quiet ones that aren't getting mentioned or in the same sort of media blitz. And we have to sort of look at the entire picture. I really appreciate everything that Attorney Woods was talking about in terms of the relationship at the sort of making sure that campaigns and candidate forums and election information is accessible at every stage, because we are constantly voting, we're constantly in election cycles. I think in a lot of the conversations I have, people come up to me and they're like, this has only been a problem the past year. Like, this year has been hell, and everything has been horrible just this past year. And I'm like, let's take a look at the past 250 years of this country. Like, we're in the semi-quincentennial year of the founding of our country. And since its founding, this country wasn't for, everyone on this call, and myself included, this country wasn't founded for me even. Mm-hmm. This country was founded for a particular, elite kind of person. And all of us have been clamoring ever since for expanding what democracy means, what this country stands for, who we are, who we represent. All of the movements in 250 years have been about a much more inclusive and just democracy for all. And, it sort of does a disservice to kind of be like, well, this, ICE just popped out of nowhere. It's like, no, ICE has been operating for the past 20 years. For 20 years, people have been kidnapped under this, special select immigration operation that's been going on. ICE has been very well funded. The range that it's gone up to now is just, completely unacceptable, but it was an unacceptable organization to begin with, right. And unlawful in, kidnapping people just because, for whatever reason they deemed they shouldn't be here. And I think, we have to sort of frame everything in the context of what, all of us have been in the trenches fighting these fights even before the current administration came into power. And those issues haven't gone away. They've been sort of exacerbated because, we're killing U.S. citizens. We're seeing the spectacle of it. But so many of these issues have been systemic for so long that, it's nice to see as many people who have been coming forward, because it kind of gives us, in this space, a little bit of breathing room to not be the only ones, trying to get people to understand what's going on, because it's become so much a part of other people's lived experiences. But, going into 2026, this is an incredibly important election year, and we need to ensure that not only these sitting, incumbent elected officials are held accountable for their actions and their complacency, or, celebrating the ones that have stood up and done, the right thing and voted, justly and righteously. But, also anyone for these open seats all around the country that we're starting to see, that, these primaries that are happening, that people are held accountable and that the right questions are being asked, that voters have a chance to participate and feel like their vote matters, now more than ever. I will also sort of plug that Santita, you always mention the league doing these sort of big high-profile debates. The Chicago League, we are doing one for the open U.S. Senate seat in Illinois. Actually, this Thursday is the Democratic primary debate, so tune into ABC 7 Chicago for that coverage. For that debate. But at every sort of level, both the high profile ones all the way down to community centers in Altgeld Gardens, we are trying to get maximum coverage and bring candidates into the communities that are not, have seen lack of investment, have seen lack of compassion and empathy, and say these are your constituents too, and this is an everybody problem that we're currently in, and it's the only viable solution for getting out of this is everybody, all hands on deck, participating in our democracy, holding the trenches, making sure that people feel safe at the polls, making sure that mutual aid and community and food security and healthcare and childcare and all of these things are taken care of, and that people feel safe here.
AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show. Give me a little bit something extra right now. I'm talking to Dr. Joseph Kiles, Rainbow Push in Memphis, Tennessee. Jane Ruby, the head of the League of Women Voters of Chicago. Westside Justice Center, you have got to get in touch with attorney Tanya Woods. She has been sounding the alarm on ICE, on our rights. Oh my goodness, you need to go up to Minnesota right now and conduct some clinics. No joke. And of course, joke. Attorney Darrell Jones, no joke. I mean, really, because Attorney Darrell Jones, you're a former prosecutor. You're the chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition. You and Attorney Barbara Arnwine have done so much work. You're doing the work on voting. And we see now, we were told, Attorney Woods, Jane Ruby, Dr. Kiles, we've got to root out the worst of the worst. This is about immigration. And Attorney General Bondi, the United States Attorney General, said, look, we can shut this down right now. If you give me your voter rolls, I can make ICE go away. Is that what I mean? What did I just read? What did I just hear? Attorney Jones. Yeah. Oh no, Darrell. I mean, Darrell, Joseph, whoever, just jump in.
I'll just jump in, and then I want to hear from Attorney Jones as well. I think it is interesting when you hear from another dominant group. Your father used to always say, a majority, leadership is born in a majority, right? Mm-hmm. What we heard today from the group of gun owners to tell the federal government that they will continue to come to these protests and they will not go unarmed was very either convenient or just by chance that ICE is now leaving, that they're being challenged by other Caucasian males.
So why is that significant to your way of thinking?
What Jane said, this country was founded upon. Mm-hmm. It was founded upon those who had money and that owned land. And as the articles of declaration and as they put together the country, everyone else fell underneath the umbrella of the Caucasian male landowner. Alex represents that very picture, and the country just saw him murdered.
No,
it's a wake-up. It's a wake-up time. It's a time to say, well, wait a minute, this isn't working the way we planned.
Why did you shake your head, Darrell? Why did that resonate with you?
Well, Santita, as part of that, and it's a larger piece that is also at play. You know, we have an attorney general who's supposed to be about protecting the rights, voting rights, of all the citizens of our country. And it appears as though it's going in the exact opposite direction. You know, there are cases before the Supreme Court right now that would make it such that the only person that could bring cases for violation of voting rights would be the Attorney General. The very person that we're talking about now that's trying to deprive everyone. The very person that we're talking about right now that was demanding voter data so that they can do voter suppressive techniques against certain people that they don't want to have vote. That's the person that would have the ability to decide what voting rights cases could go forward. Santita, I tell you what else, you know, when you saw me shaking my head and I put my head down, part of what happened was a message that I think you and I just received from Nikema Armstrong.
Mm.
Nikema Armstrong was the young lady who was at the church in Minneapolis when and led a protest regarding the ICE presence and everything else. And ICE came in and arrested her. The U.S. Attorney's Office under Pam Bondi had a indictment issued for Nikema Levy Armstrong. They arrested her, put this attorney in handcuffs, right, for a charge that no one can really figure out how it applies to her at all in doing a protest at a church. So part of the reason you saw me put my head down was because we just got a message from Nikema Armstrong, because I had been trying to reach her. I just wanted to be certain that she was okay, because she had been disappeared for a moment and we couldn't catch up to her. Well, what we just found out was what happened was consistent with what this U.S. Attorney's Office has been doing. They took her phone. They took her phone to go through her contacts to see what was in there. That's what was going on. That's why we couldn't reach her. This is just incredible, Santita, that what we're seeing happen. And it's more of a reason that we need more people like the people in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and throughout the state of Minnesota, and across the country that are standing up and saying, I'm sick and tired of this. This is enough. This needs to stop. And that's what needs to happen. Santita, you know, let me close out, because you know I like people to have action items, right? Because they can sit there and they can listen to us to their ears, you know, fill up with wax or whatever, but you need something to do. Right now, as we speak, you know, I talked about the $85 billion that ISIS has been up, and they're getting ready to get more money possibly this week. The action item that people can do right now is they can call 202-224-3121 and tell your senator not to allow another dime to go toward ICE, to stop that funding bill that's there right now. 202-224-3121. And don't stop there, because it's not just a federal issue. If you don't like the idea of these immigrants, those are immigrants that are in our country that are being held in these detention facilities, they're being held in detention, including children, are being held, and families are being held in detention facilities where it's reported that at the Dilley place in Texas, the Dilley holding place in Texas, there are bugs that are in the food that are being fed to them. The water that the mothers are using to give to the infant children that are there, the water is brown and smells. That's what they have to mix the formula with to feed the babies. If you don't agree with this, you can go to your local city council or county council and be certain that they put in zoning restrictions. They put in legislation to disallow any type of immigrant facility from being built in your community. These are positive steps that you can take. You may not want to be on the front line and out in the streets and, well, I like to say, off the sidewalks and into the street and getting in good trouble, but you can certainly call the 202-224-3121 and tell them to vote against this. You can reach out to your local legislator, both state and local, to be certain that they do all they can to block any type of immigration facility from being built, Santita.
Well, now, you know, we're having technical difficulties, but everyone can hear you but me. But that's right. That's all right. We're going to keep this going because I want to get closing thoughts from everyone. And I'm hoping that we will reconvene, because I think that while we're in this moment, while we're all galvanized, we have to do what, Daryl, you've really made it like the centerpiece of your life's work. We got to get out. We got to get out and vote. That's what you do, Jane. That's what you've been doing. We've been running with Reverend Jackson a long time. And now we see why he has always been so intentional about the vote.
Right.
While we are grieving the loss of 3 lives, don't forget Keith Porter in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Don't forget him. Please don't. He was shooting a gun up in the air like people do on New Year's Eve, and an off-duty ICE agent decided to kill him to protect the neighborhood. Don't forget that, everybody. Please say Keith Porter's name. Say he was a father of 2 daughters. And they're shielding this ICE agent. But in this moment, you can vote about it. You're not powerless. When you see ICE being removed, when you see Tom Homan, there is no border in Minneapolis, but there is the Mississippi River. How about that for for symmetry? Well, the reason you see all this movement and you see the White House jumping around, it's because people have moved and people have changed their minds about all of this. And they are not playing. And they are watching people all over the country. People by the thousands are marching in below zero weather all over the country. Think about that, everybody. But now it's time for you to vote. I'm going to get closing thoughts from everybody. Jane, I know we've got some important events coming up here in Chicago. Help us to understand how we can be involved, how we can tune in, and just let us know what's on your mind.
Yeah, we have our upcoming primary, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. That seems to happen to us every 5-ish years. Quite a lucky, unlucky day to have a primary, but there are so many open seats this time up in Illinois that it is more important than ever to know who's on your ballot, to vote accordingly, to pay attention to candidate forums, pay attention to news articles, reach out to the campaigns. You need to know who you're voting for. You need to know what these people stand for. It's been very interesting to see there's been a big movement amongst candidates to sort of either reject donations for groups that support ICE, or the idea of canceling statewide contracts for companies that contract with ICE. And so there's really sort of a movement, both short-term and long-term, to ensure that we're, not in this position again with sort of a federal, administrative army that's being inflicted on the people. So, it's important to pay attention and vote according to what you believe the direction the country is going in. I think my earlier comment about, the helpers, it's really important to know who the helpers are and support their work. We all have ties to so many great community-based organizations that are really in the trenches fighting the good fight on this. If you have any sort of special skill set to be able to deploy that, whether it's election protection programming, peacekeeping, if you're faith leaders, there's, like we're seeing in Minneapolis, the faith leaders that were arrested, they were, arm in arm, like basically forming a blockade. There's so many different ways for people to get activated, get involved. There's so many ways to call into your legislators and tell them what's on your mind, and they're accountable to you. To Daryl's point earlier, our tax dollars pay for all of this. And, the economic interest at play is incredibly powerful. That was very much in line with what Dr. King was talking about, the economics of oppression and how everything is connected. Minneapolis had a general strike over the weekend where people took to the streets instead of, buying stuff at Target or whatever. It's those sorts of things make a difference. There's a call for a general strike at the national level. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. Really sort of seeing where stuff is made, who's making it, making informed decisions about where you shop. All of these things can have huge impacts on the path of our country moving forward and what we stand for. And it's pretty interesting to see who's getting activated, who's starting to be, you know, the more people that get affected by these policies, the more people that get activated. You know, that's really what it's going to take when you cease to be comfortable by what your country has to offer. You know, that's when you sort of demand change out of the system, and more people are uncomfortable in all the right ways, especially, you know, because of everything that has historically been the case. You know, we might get to see some, out of all of this, we might get to see some really awesome, progressive, incredible bouts of justice and equity and inclusion that come out of sort of the depths of hell that we're all experiencing now. You know, we can maybe see Medicare for all. We can maybe see universal child care. We're already seeing that in New York, child universal pre-K. Like, these things are all possible, and maybe out of this darkness, you know, we will get more people to understand what's needed to make the country, you know, the much more just and equitable place it should be for all.
Well, Dr. Joseph Kiles, Dr. King has some unfinished business, and we've been on that march since 1968. Nothing has stopped.
Nothing has stopped. Santita, your brother Jesse Jr. wrote a fantastic book, A More Perfect Union, and I often go back and read different chapters that were my favorite. And I'm thinking now of Dr. King's work and others, all of the heroes and sheroes that are unsung. Food insecurity, housing, and healthcare, all the rising costs in every major city and in rural areas. And as I've said before, more than 50 million Americans last year visited food banks. And so in a nation that has 30 trillion in terms of a GNP, it makes no sense to have this level. It's criminal to have this level of poverty. And it doesn't say well for our leaders. And we're not just talking about the individuals who are elected. I often spend more time talking to my friends who are in that class, that 10%, that 1%, about what they are doing to lift people out of poverty. It cannot always be about the bottom line and the dollar. And on a conversation that I had with an individual who was wealthy, said to me this weekend, one life doesn't matter, all lives have to matter. And we are all in the same boat. And that's the first time he ever said that to me. He is insulated from these issues, and he's not been very active until now. As you said at the start of the show, something has changed, and poverty is engineered. And if it can be engineered, it can be reconstructed.
Daryl, your closing thought.
Santita, I really enjoy listening to Jane, Ruby, as well as Dr. Kiles and what they've laid out. I don't think that I could say anything that other than underscoring what they've said. But the one thing I do want to say is this. The question right now is, what are we going to do about where we are? And I believe it begins, yes, going to the political forums and learning about candidates, excuse me, but all of that doesn't matter if you have not taken step one. And that is going to vote.org to see if you're registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, you need to get registered to vote. You need to find out where your polling place is. You need to start making a plan now. Because I'm telling you, without fear of contradiction, that there's going to be all kinds of game playing that's going to come about as the closer we get to voting time. And polling places may be moved. You may see, we talked about having ICE or National Guard showing up around polling places to intimidate voters. You're probably going to see, and one of the things I heard recently was that they may start trying to do some type of checkpoint on highways to make it more difficult for you to get to a polling place. All of these things are practicalities and realities of what could happen during this season. And I say what could happen, and folks, always, oh, there he goes again. He's off the deep end about what could happen. Well, we had warned previously that what could happen with regards to ICE, what could happen with regards to the National Guard, what happens when they come into a community. And here we sit now. Folks didn't believe us when we were just talking about it early, but now it's happening. We need to stop thinking about, are we moving toward an authoritarian state, and start understanding that we are in an authoritarian state. And the question is, how do we now respond to it, and how do we work our way out of it, if that's what our will is? And that is through the practice of voting. It's through nonviolence. It's through getting out and off the sidewalks, into the street, into good trouble and peaceful trouble. I'm not saying do anything that causes any violence, but you've got to raise your voice, because I tell you, our parents and Santita, your mom probably put it different than my mom, where it said that it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. Well, you know what? If you're not squeaking, you're not going to get the oil. And so we now, as the people, it is time for us to raise our voices in dissent to what we're seeing. If we raise our voices collectively in dissent, if we raise our voices through our vote, then our voices can be heard. But if we do nothing, if we sit back, if we hope that somebody else will step in the gap for us to represent us, don't wait on that. Be that person. Be the change, be the difference, and get involved, Santita.
Well, I can tell you this, everybody, you never know how God is going to use somebody and use these extraordinary circumstances to open our eyes. There's a wonderful gospel song by a wonderful group whose name escapes my attention at the moment. Perhaps you remember it. Open Our Eyes. You remember that, Joseph? Open our eyes so that we might see. Renee Good, in her own way, helped to open our eyes. Keith Porter is opening our eyes. Alex Pretty, opening our eyes. Open your eyes in this moment. The only reason we don't have universal health care, universal access to a great education, equal high quality education, the only reason we don't have the beloved society is because we have not made it up in our minds to have it. We can do that. We don't have to watch people murdered in the streets. You need to pray for the healing of these ICE agents who feel the need to behave as they do. There's something that is not right when you pull a gun out of someone's belt and then 10 shots go off and you start counting the bullet holes before you find his pulse. Something in you has died. And we need to pray. We need to pray about that. There's a moral rot here, a moral rot that we're seeing. And we're all in it. Nobody's clean. We're either going to get clean together or we are going to perish together. So we have to make some decisions about the kind of society that we want in this 250th year of the existence of the Republic. Do you want to see people killed in the streets? Do you want to be strong-armed? Do you want our country and our government held captive by forces that we can't even mention by name? Really? That's not how this American society is supposed to be. We're not supposed to be fighting wars in foreign lands. We're not supposed to be doing that. If America decided to be a peacemaker, we wouldn't be broke. That's what we are right now, $38 trillion in debt. We owe $3 trillion right now because there's interest on that debt. What are we going to do? They don't even have pennies anymore. In a minute, all your currency is going to be digital. So what does that mean? When the computers go down, you're not going to have access to your money? Really? What kind of society do you want? While we're protesting ICE, we need to be fighting for our health care right now. While the government's listening, you need to be fighting for that right now. You need to be fighting for funding for schools. You need to be fighting for every child to have a computer. And Apple, we made them $1 trillion corporation. And every house should have a computer.
Mm-hmm.
The internet should be a public utility. Think about the society, not that you don't think you can have, but you know what you deserve.
That's right.
Some things should be open and free because you need it. You cannot exist in this society, Joseph, without access to the internet. You need a computer. And since we've made Apple $1 trillion corporation, and we are making Elon Musk a trillionaire because they're doing it off of government contracts, why don't you demand, because that's your money. You need to demand some justice and fairness, everybody. I want you to check out Daryl Jones and Barbara Arnwine on WOL, DC. Great independent Black radio station. It's independent media. You need it. At 12 noon Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday, you need to be there. Daryl, you need to get Dr. Joseph Kyles on your show because the same things Dr. King was fighting for, the same things he was fighting for, the people of Memphis are impoverished today. The garbage workers still don't have what they need today. Jane, we've got to participate in all of these fora. We need them. We need to ask these candidates some real questions. We need to open it up. So everybody, please like and share this show. Like and share this show. But the commercial appeal in Memphis, I'm going to be passing out, and you can go on my social media, and you'll see this tremendous op-ed piece that Dr. Kyles has written. Because you really need to understand that Memphis is Chicago, it's Minneapolis, it's Detroit, it's Los Angeles, it's Jackson, it's Washington. Most Americans are struggling, everybody. My brother Jesse, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., hopefully he'll win his primary. I said it.
That's
I'm
right.
voting for my brother.
I
But he's
second
running
that
it amongst fine people. So
That's right.
whoever wins, you're going to be well represented. But he did say that we were the best dressed poor people in the world. We don't have health care. They're collapsing our public school system.
That's right.
It's not collapsing, it's being collapsed. All the things that we need to get out from under, they're being removed from us. Think about that.
Right.
And now if you walk down the street and if you ask an ICE agent or something, you might not walk away alive. Think about that. A man cannot even protect a woman from being knocked on the ground without having 10 bullets fired his way. That's what he was trying to do. He wasn't brandishing a gun. With one hand, he was trying to protect the woman. With the other one, he was trying to record it all. Think about that, everybody. You need to vote. You have the power. You need to vote. You need to get involved in all of these elections. You can't be that busy.
That's right.
Don't be that busy. I love you, everybody. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I love you, Dr. Joseph Kyles, Jane Ruby, my little sister, and Attorney Daryl Jones. I love you too. I love all you and Bailey. You and I didn't hear Bailey woof 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 in the day. So I love all of you, and I love you, Attorney Tanya Woods and Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds. Love you. Love all of you, my morning stars. Please like and share the show. Like and share the show. And thank you for all that you're doing to help grow the show, because we keep finding that as on all of these different platforms that we get more than 1 million hits, and it's a great thing.
Beautiful.
So continue to help us with the algorithm, everybody. Like and share the show. Just do that, do that. Love you so much, and pay attention to this story. This is the time that we are supposed to be alive, and we're supposed to be participating, everybody. So get involved. I love you. I love all of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.